On? I'm on.
Are you on?
Am I on?
Hello. I'm on.
You're on.
We're good.
On.
We're in business. Strong start. Thank you, Steve. We really appreciate it. This event has been awesome, and we appreciate you guys sticking around for day 3. I'm really excited that this is wrapping everything up because I think this ties together pretty much everything that we've been talking about for the past couple days. Segmentation, testing, data analysis, that stuff all kind of contributes profoundly to automation. And we really had a great time when we were planning this panel together, getting together and talking about different strategies and how we make automation work and what we really think the future of automation looks like. So to kick things off, I just want to do quick introductions, and then we'll keep it real casual. Like Steve said, I'm Kait Creamer. I'm with MakeMusic. I work for Finale and Smart Music. We do music education and music notation software. I manage the digital marketing team, and I'm also the biggest email geek on the team, by far. Morgan.
Wow, I don't know. That's a tough act to follow. So Morgan Chemij, I oversee acquisition and retention marketing for the store on HP.com. So that's HP's direct-to-consumer business. And yeah, I'm very fortunate in being able to oversee the acquisition and the retention side. So a lot of infighting that might happen in other organizations, I'm able to quash pretty quickly and help get things done.
Neil Gogate from Mattel. I oversee, I'm the senior manager of CRM and acquisition marketing. I oversee all of the brands, so I'm sure many of you or your kids or your grandkids have either played with some of our toys, Fisher-Price, Barbie, Hot Wheels. I've heard a lot of groans about American Girl, so I'm sorry, and I also appreciate. Thank you.
Great. Well, I'm in the market for a lot of your toys since I have three toddlers. Hot Wheels is a big one for us since I've got 3 boys. But my name's Luke Kintigh. I'm the head of publishing for Intel IQ, and Intel IQ is our flagship content marketing platform. It's essentially a digital magazine that's focused on IT decision makers and senior level engineers, and we're really looking, our publication is not necessarily looking at where Intel's business is today, it's more where it's going tomorrow, so you'll see a lot of content about artificial intelligence, 5G, autonomous driving, and it's pretty nerdy, so if you want to check it out, you can, but probably, honestly, a lot of you guys are, unless you're senior level engineers, are probably not in our wheelhouse for our target, so.
Luke, you mentioned what things look like today. Quick high-level overview. What does automation look like for your respective companies today?
Yeah. Yeah, so today, I mean, we're using a ton of automation, obviously in email, but you know, I think what we're trying to figure out is how do you connect all the dots together, right, with automation. So, you know, we do a lot of personalized email based on content consumption and behaviors, and then on site, we're using, you know, content recommendation widgets. We're starting to use, you know, personalized experiences based on, you know, previous, you know, where they previously have been within the Intel ecosystem. So for our program, it's probably a little bit unique where we're very top funnel. We're not really talking a lot about product. We're actually trying to feature our people versus the product. However, if someone had been to an Intel.com product page that was looking at, you know, an actual like product spec, if they then go to IQ, we are, you know, then trying to tie the data together to then surface up, you know, with almost like a banner ad type of execution, like inside the content that will then, you know, target them back to that type of content. So, yeah, so we're a lot of ways similar to like retailers, where if you're on a site, you're looking at a product, you go to CNN.com, you know, of course, all of a sudden you're seeing that shoe you just shopped for. So we're trying to kind of implement a similar execution where, you know, if we know that they've been somewhere else in the Intel ecosystem, which is pretty large, that we're tying that experience together. So that's a big one for us.
Morgan, you're running into some parallels there at HP too. Tell me a little more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really challenging factor that we have. Luke's in a great position in the fact that they're able to create a lot of kind of best-in-class content. I think one of the biggest struggles that we currently face is we've kind of got distinct sets of users, HP being a printing company and a PC company. You know, there's a subsection of our user base that's they're using their PCs at home, at the office, and so the content that we're serving them is very different than the content that we're serving businesses who are printing. As we move into 3D printing, that brings a whole nother level of content that we need to create. And then there's smaller businesses that are doing photo printing, canvas printing, so on and so forth. And so one of the biggest challenges that we have, I think a lot of big brands, there's specific brand standards that need to be met. And so creating content that's reflective of your brand and your brand standards and doing it at scale to make automation work is really challenging. The amount of permutations that you require to have good automation and good personalized communication, it's really, really expensive. And it's tough because an investment in content is an investment that'll pay itself off in perpetuity, but a lot of us don't report business results on a 5-year view, we report it on a quarterly view, and making an investment in today where the payout's going to take place over multiple years in the form of content and engagement and LTV is challenging because there's a lot of focus on first order profitability and how are we getting them in the door, what's making them buy right now. And so the investment in content to enable better automation and better personalization it's a struggle, and I think it's probably a struggle that a lot of larger brands have.
I like that you touched on brand specificity, and Neil, I would love to have you speak to this because you have so many brands.
Yes, we do. I think the challenge for us at Mattel is that we're really looking generally at digital as a new frontier for us. Mattel has been a company for over 70 years, and our bread and butter has always been doing marketing through TV, through print. How many of you watched Saturday morning cartoons and saw the commercials and immediately nagged your parents and said, "Oh, I want that Barbie," or "I want this"? It's been digital for us has been something that we've been very slow to adopt, and I think we are starting to make some right moves over the past couple of years. Where that causes some complications, though, is that we've always allowed our brands to focus very singularly. So Barbie operates on its own, Hot Wheels operates on its own, Fisher-Price operates on its own. From my perspective, though, I'm looking at it more from an enterprise level. And so really trying to figure out how do we build that proper consumer life cycle. And for us, the consumer is actually the child. The person we really want to try to market to is the shopper, the parent, the grandparent, the aunt, the uncle. What we're trying to do, though, is we want to connect all of our brands together because we have an opportunity to really take a parent and child from a brand like Fisher-Price, allow us to introduce them to a brand like Thomas the Train, go to Barbie, to Hot Wheels, to Matchbox, to American Girl. It's an interesting challenge that we're facing, and we're starting to get a lot more buy-in from our brand partners as well to understand how we can really do that one-to-one communication to really personalize the content, make it more relevant to them, and also showcase the wealth of content and the products that our brands have.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you touched on scalability. That's something that I know we've really struggled with at MakeMusic because we have such a small team and we have different brands. And so getting stakeholder buy-in has been really important for us because without that data being aligned, we're not going to get anywhere anytime fast. So I'd like to hear you speak a little bit more about, getting that buy-in and how do you overcome that initial hurdle, and then once you have the buy-in, where do you go next?
Yeah, I think we've finally there's been a big divide between what the business wants and what the IT organization wanted, and so I think over the last 2 years we've really gotten some good alignment on both sides to understand what we need from an organization to really drive this thing forward. And think getting that IT leadership support, getting our senior leadership support, and getting the businesses to buy into this has been really critical. I think the next step for us is really trying to piece all this together. We've onboarded with Adobe Campaign, and we're pulling in some of the other parts of their stack to really help us really synthesize this data in a way to make it more meaningful to us. We spent a lot of time having very siloed data in 15, 16 different databases, and it's not functional, it's not worthwhile for anybody. And so bringing all these pieces together, getting leadership alignment, getting the teams to support this not only with budget and resources has been a big key in starting to drive some of the automation forward.
Definitely. Luke, you mentioned content a little bit earlier, and I really liked what you had to say about kind of getting evergreen content versus getting brand new content and using that with your data so you're not really stretching yourself super thin on all fronts. Right. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, so we have a luxury of we create about 30 to 40 pieces of original content a month that's long form in nature, so it'll have anywhere from 800 to 1,000 words, multiple images, videos, etc. So it's pretty robust in terms of the way we present out the information. It's very dynamic. So what we've learned over several years really is how do you take a piece of content like that and really deconstruct it in a way to get like maximum usage out of it. So we will basically, before we actually lay out the article, we'll look at the assets and say, okay, how do we build this image for our Instagram channel, or how do we take this pull quote and make a really compelling, make that a social copy that we can put throughout our social channels. So so I think we're looking at our long form content in particular as a way to deconstruct it, so you're getting it's manifesting in 10, 12 different social ads or ad units, and it's living across all those different channels. And of course, it all kind of invariably the CTA, when you interact with that content in the ecosystem, you're coming back to that original piece of content for further engagement. But I think one kind of best practice that we've learned, we don't do a lot of like list posts, or is also known as listicles, which I don't like that word, so I go with the list-based post. But yeah, I think a great way to leverage that type of content is you actually look at into the individual items in that list as its own article in itself. So how do you look at, if you have 3 personas you're targeting, how do you look at those images and that copy as maybe very specific to different personas and segments? So yeah, I think it takes a lot of like proactive thinking around when you're building out the content, instead of saying like, okay, we published it and where's it going to go? It's going to go here. Really thinking about, where is that content going to travel and how is it natively going to live in those spaces and channels.
How are you using data to inform who sees what?
Yeah, we, in terms of distribution, we have pretty flexible, we call kind of like we've moved from a fixed to more of a flexible approach, where we're creating a lot of content, right? So we're putting every piece of content out into market in some way or another, but invariably what we've learned is that a small percentage of that content will actually perform. So it's anywhere typically between about 10 to 20% of your content will drive up to about 90% of your engagement if you optimize it towards your KPIs. And there's like variables, right? Depending on your business model and your audiences, that could vary. But for us, that's pretty much the truth. So for our distribution strategy, it all kind of comes down to how do you find those winners that work hard for you and double down on that. So kind of a Moneyball approach of you shift away your investments to the content that's not performing and pour that back into what is working. So that's been a big learning for us.
I love that. I think that totally speaks to the iterative approach that everybody's been talking about this week, talking about content modules in emails, and then taking a look, saying, okay, we're going to try this, we'll test it, and then see what works from there. I think that's really important. Automation it's so easy to set it and forget it if it continues running on its own, but it's such a missed opportunity. If you've got something that you can constantly test, why wouldn't you be constantly testing it? I'd like to hear more about that from you, Morgan, because I know you had a kind of a different take on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, there's it's interesting. Part of testing is there's 2 different pieces, right? It's the content itself, and then it's the ad tech behind it, or the stack behind it. We're very fortunate in that we leverage Adobe and Salesforce pretty extensively for the vast majority of what we do. And while they're kind of closed walls in some capacity, what it allows us to do in particular is to partner with other brands, leveraging first, second, and third-party data. And so, for example, with Intel, we have the capability of looking at people, for example, who have been on Intel IQ, and looked at gaming content, for example. Yeah. And then when they come into the store homepage on HP.com, we know that they've been to Intel. We know specifically what they've looked at on Intel.com. And we can serve a very personalized experience as a result of that. So being able to go ahead and test that versus what our control experience would be if we didn't have that data and just show them a simple homepage, or even when there's a specific aspect of the site that's called tech takes. And so that's similar to what you guys are creating. We're pushing out about 1 article a day, video, images, long-form content, short-form content, et cetera. But even when people come into that section of the site based on other areas of our site that they visited, or potentially areas of Intel that they visited, we're able to go ahead and serve appropriate content. And that even extends beyond the owned experience. If we look at the marketing assets that we're putting out there, display collateral that these individuals are going to see, being able to use second-party data through the Adobe stack, where we're able to share audiences pretty easily, barring any legal restrictions. It allows us to go ahead and test that creative against our standard creative that we might target a gaming audience with. And so I think, if people in the room think about who their bigger partners are, is there an opportunity to go ahead and share data? And then the other piece, going back to, I mentioned earlier on about, the cost of creating assets, is there an opportunity to share assets? Obviously, brand alignment with, Intel powers a lot of what we do. And so what they're saying to their end customers about the processing power of an Intel i7 chip, what he's saying on his site, I could very, very easily leverage on my site. And so that's one less asset that I have to go and create, and instead I can take those dollars and create something else and still satisfy, the content requirements that I need to be pushing out on a daily basis. And so things like that, not just testing your own assets, but testing partner assets as well. Taking that kind of scrappy startup mindset, regardless of the size of your organization, and testing some things out. Hopefully that gets at what you're asking.
Absolutely. And what's cool about that, I think, is it speaks to what Brian said earlier about using what you have. So that's not only internally, that's also externally. Work with your partners, figure out what they can provide to you so you're not having to hustle 100% of the time for absolutely everything that you're putting together. Use what you have and see what works and test iteratively. You mentioned something earlier, this is kind of a diversion, but I was really interested in it when you were talking about personalization. Do you see a point of diminishing returns with how personal do we get with this? Does it get creepy, and do people react poorly to it when it does?
I think it's, look, you could probably cut this room in half about people who think we're doing too much and people who think we're not doing enough. I think, forget who was speaking to it yesterday, but we're very much catering towards I don't want to say an entitled audience. I don't know if that's the appropriate way of thinking of it, but I think audience expectations have elevated over the last couple of years, and they know how much insight and data we have on them as consumers based upon interactions with our emails. With HP, obviously they're using our hardware, they're using our printers. We know how much they're printing. We know if they're printing in black and white. We know if they're using HP ink versus remanufactured refilled ink. And so they know that we have all these insights, and I think they expect us as a brand, and I'm just using us, to deliver them relevant and engaging experiences. And I think if we're not doing that, and we're treating, if you buy a brand new PC, and I'm sending you content about what you should do about your old slow PC, obviously I'm not taking that content to light. I'm delivering information to you that's not relevant, and ultimately it's going to go to spam. It's going to effectively give you a poor brand experience, and I think we all want to avoid that. And so there probably is a level of personalization creepiness, but I don't think we're there yet. Certainly I don't think as a brand, I don't think HP's there. There might be other brands that are, but it's a fine line that you have to walk, honestly.
That wasn't a challenge, I assure you.
Yeah, I find your messages to be kind of creepy, but that's just me. I think for us, it's very much the same. We're trying to find that balance between what is personalized and what's engaging and what's kind of over the edge. I think where we're at is we're really trying to look at segmentation as that first piece, trying to make sure we understand, the different consumer sets within our data, and then trying to make sure that we're providing value. So if you visit the Fisher-Price website and you've looked at a rocker, obviously, you don't have a baby who maybe is walking yet. So We want to make sure that we're providing content, products that are relevant to you, whether you're looking at it on the website or on the email, or even potentially through media and banner ads. So I think that's one of the places we're looking at, trying to start moving towards more personalization. I don't think we're there yet. I think it's constantly evolving for us.
I like that you bring up the point of understanding where customers are in their journey. I'd like to know from all three of you, how do you think automation can support better life cycle nurturing?
Yeah, one thing we've done is, one of my disciplines that I oversee and kind of try to drive is audience development, which is, basically a fancy word for user journey. But we've mapped out the different stages of our audience, what we want them to do once they've interacted with our content. Everything from what we call a flyby audience, which means that they've seen a piece of media, but they haven't been to our site, to a first-time reader, to a repeat reader, to an email subscriber, to a loyalist, which we qualify based on their level of engagement with email. So we have these kind of key stages that we look at of what we're trying to drive towards, and then what we've done is we originally started out with the editorial, how editorial would be different based on where they're at in that particular stage. And then we also looked at KPIs, of course, they will change a little bit based on where they're at that stage. And then the last layer we've done recently is took our stack and said, okay, there's certain tools at Intel, this HP, I'm sure has a massive tech stack, right? We've got, I always joke our toolbox won't shut because it's too full, but it's a good problem to have, I guess. So there's certain tools in our stack, right, that are very good at acquisition and looking at real-time data, and then once you start to get down into email, right, you're looking at more retention-based tools, and looking at what kind of tools can deliver real audience insights around demographics and who they exactly are, not what they're doing. So yeah, that's been really helpful to share to stakeholders in particular, where they're like, wait, what is this tool? How is it used? Or okay, this is the use case for it, and this is how it ladders up to our overall strategy. So it's been helpful for our team internally, and then externally we can show a one-page slide and say, here's really what our goals are, and here's how everything we do ladders to those different stages. So.
I think for us, and I spoke to this a little bit earlier, we're trying to develop the general consumer life cycle and being able to bridge between the brands and move the the shopper along in the journey. I think the challenge that, in particular in my role, I'm always being asked, how do we bring in new consumers? How do we bring in new consumers? And it's always coming from a brand perspective. Part of this is also, having them understand that there is a retention part of this, that we can spend less and execute our content better so that we do that bridge between a Fisher-Price and a Thomas, so that they're not actually a new consumer to the company. They are a new shopper, they're a new child, they're a new consumer of content for that brand, but we haven't actually spent any new money to bring that consumer in. So I think the challenge is trying to do those proper transitions. I made this comment yesterday, and we've been talking a lot about the crawl, walk, run. And for me, I think where we're at is we're the child that's just starting to turn over. So we're about that 6-month phase. But I think the challenge really is, and something we're starting to address, is how to bridge those gaps between the brands and how to make our brands understand that retention really is more than just providing good content. It's really trying to understand what they're doing and where they're at in their consumer journey.
Yeah, so I think you guys made some really good points. We're doing similar things. I think the one piece, when you're dealing with so many different SKUs, and like I alluded to before, we're doing 3D printing, we're doing large format printing, the podiums that we have outside to these types of cards that we have here, photo printing on small Bluetooth enabled printers. To really understand the content and the customer, I have a small team, we leverage agencies, we're never gonna know as much about that end consumer as the individual product manager, right? And so it's really about, as much as the automation journey is about the consumer and what we serve up to the consumer, it's also about us educating ourselves well on what are the real KSPs for each of these individual products. what's going to make a consumer print more on their Bluetooth printer? What's going to make them get better use out of it? What's going to get them to post images to Instagram that they took on this printer? What's going to get them to use the app more? And so I think part of it is educating our own internal talent, the product managers, is to look at all the stuff that we can do with automation. How should we do it? What types of assets do you think are going to resonate well? And then taking that and testing it out. And so, I think for us, our automation journey is really kind of about that individual consumer, the products that they're using, and then effectively being able to deliver lifestyle tips, ways to encourage greater use of a specific printer in this instance. Or, maybe there's a better business model than what they're doing right now. So we have a service, it's Instant Ink. It's a subscription-based service. If you're not printing a lot, you don't want a cartridge that's going to dry out because you haven't used it in 6 months. Maybe Instant Ink, where you're spending $2 or $3 a month and you're getting ink delivered on an ongoing basis. So how do we add value? It's not just about digging deep into the consumer's wallet. I think the example that American Express had, where they said their subscription model had increased by 2x or something along those lines as far as cost, and American Express noted that to them. We want to be able to provide value in that same capacity. And so I think, our automation and our journey is very much informed by kind of consumer actions and then our own internal stakeholders and what they bring to the table based on their knowledge of the consumer.
That's so important, and I love that you brought up kind of letting people internally know what you can do, because that's something that I run into all the time. We live in this world of we eat, sleep, and breathe email, and so we know that you can go through your database and say, okay, this person got these 5 emails on this day, they opened, they engaged this way. That blows people's minds on a regular basis. Like, people are so amazed by it, and so I think it's so important to internally kind of do like, a friend of mine has a term, like internal roadshows, where you can go around and say, hey, this is what we can do. Can you help us inform those decisions? So you're communicating across the company, and it's making that internal buy-in a lot easier, and you're reaching your customers in a more valuable way. So I want to wrap it up with one last question for the 3 of you. What are the first 1 or 2 easy wins that you would recommend for people who are looking to start with automation for the first time or make their automation a heck of a lot better?
Yeah. Do you want me to start?
Yeah?
Okay. No. Go.
Dig right in.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, going back to content, I'll speak maybe the content side of it, because of course, like, A/B testing, all these tools, personalization, it's all great, but unless you have really compelling content, that's really what drives the boat. So what we've learned, and that's typically a lot of the problems. I mean, I know talking to other peers in the industry too, it's like, yeah, we've got all this like awesome tools, but like, man, we have such a hard time getting content, like the right content for it. Or you're trying to force fit like, content that's really not built for your audience or your email, and like trying to pretty much put lipstick on a pig. So what we did before, because we were actually kind of late to the game with email, we've only been doing email for about 2 years for IQ, so we're still, I think we're probably similar to your Quell Rock one, yeah, turnover, yeah. But what's really helped us power our email and personalization is creating serialized content. So almost all the content we do is part of like a 3 to 4 to 5 part series, and it's kind of this repeatable format of, we introduce a really compelling topic, like, women in AI, like what are some like awesome women that are like doing groundbreaking stuff in the AI industry. So look, kind of explain the topic and then feature different women in the industry, and then kind of wrap it up with, post number 5 or 6. And so that's great for email because it's very like sequential. So it's great for retargeting too. That's the reason why we did it in the first place, was to do content sequencing. And then we're like, well, this works really well for email. So yeah, I think that would be one of my tips. And then just in terms of like understanding your audience, there's so many free tools out there that, whether it's Google Trends or Quora Q&A forums, there's a site called Answer the Public, which aggregates all the search data around particular terms and turns it into like top questions answered. So, this is more from like ideation and production to feed your email, but there's a lot of free tools out there that will give you a pulse of what your audiences are searching for, what are they sharing, what are they reading, and that's great fodder to create content around because you're speaking directly to their needs. So, and it's good to get outside this like stakeholder checkbox mantra that a lot of us are in, where it's like, oh, I need content with like these 5 things, and make sure to mention this feature. And that's, of course, important to bake it into your content, but this kind of like is able to empower you with data to say, okay, that's great, but here's the reality of the customer, and here's what they're here's what they're searching for, here's what they're sharing. So yeah, and I'm happy to talk to anybody that wants to learn more about using some of those tools, because again, they're free, they're pretty easy to use, and they're a great asset to what we do.
That's great, Luke. Thanks.
I think for us, it's alignment and being data-driven and data-conscious. I think we spent a lot of time doing a lot of decisions just based on gut checks rather than being fact-based and data-driven. Getting alignment with those metrics and with that data, sharing that with leadership, getting them to buy in, getting them to understand has really helped move things along. Personally, I'm wowed by what everyone else is doing here, and I'm taking a lot of this back with me to show them what the art of possible really is. So, but I think for us, really, it's been trying to just get that alignment with everybody to get them to understand what this digital frontier really has to offer to our brands, and how that can really translate to great conversion, great engagement with our shoppers and our consumers.
Yeah, I think for us, look, as much as we're all marketers and we love that, like, we're always the ones to come up with the best ideas, more often than not, we're not the ones to come up with the best ideas. The best ideas come from different sources of the organization or from customer feedback directly. So I think, the easiest thing to do, honestly, is some of what you spoke to, just educating the people at your organization about what's possible, and on some degree what's not possible. I can't send an email to Google and have them improve our organic search rankings, but I can give you insight into what people are clicking on within our owned assets. And honestly, like, who's the closest to the end consumer? For us, it's customer support in our call center. And the insights that we get from them on, what's resonating with the end consumer and what questions the end consumer is having about how to use the product, how to get the most out of the product, that's where we get some of the best ideas for content. And so think about within your own org, who's actually closest to the consumer, who actually has the best insight. It's, as much as we like to think it's us as marketers, it's oftentimes a very different part of the organization that has the most insight.
It's a valuable take. Thank you guys so much. We really appreciate it.
By the way, our only dude panel throughout the day, the only all-dude panel. We have a couple of minutes for questions. If anybody has any quick questions of the panel. I have a lightning round for you three. Since you guys raised it, what's the best insight that you got from your customers that you put into practice in the email channel?
Me specifically?
And all three of you, lightning round, all three of you. What's the best insight that you actually got from a customer about how to better use your email, or what not to do?
For me and for us, it's a really silly and stupid one, but it's send me stuff that's relevant. I actually saw someone post that on our Facebook page, saying, I don't have a child this age anymore. Please know us.
You should know this, right?
Yeah.
That's what they told you, is you should know us better than this, right? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I think for us, this has been some feedback we've got across the board. Is again, a lot of our target audiences are pretty senior level, IT decision makers, and so we try to. Originally our content strategy was like really kind of more technical, and they were essentially like, hey, there's already a ton of content out there that does that. Like, the world does not need another white paper. So we kind of shifted away from that, and they said, what I'm really interested in is what's the point of view from my peers, right? And a lot of that is at Intel, like people that are actually working on the same projects they are, that are inside of Intel, but we also try to have a formula that's pretty much like Intel source and then a couple outside sources to reinforce the message. So that's been a valuable piece of feedback, was like, oh yeah, we have to kind of replicate what's already out there. And this audience wants, like, they're very technical, they want all the specs and feeds and speeds, and they were like, yeah, we do, but that's like dime a dozen. So to differentiate us, we kind of moved into this idea of like focusing on our people over the products. So
I think for us, there's a macro trend that we have such a proliferation of SKUs available for the customer to purchase. It's somewhat overwhelming. And so specifically within the gaming vertical, We've started to double down and increase the available SKU count. And I think sometimes customers have come to us specifically spending like 30 minutes on the phone with our support agents, steering them towards the right product, which is great. We'd love to spend that amount of time, but we've made a significant investment in content assets to help the customer steer their own journey based upon, are they interested in like VR gaming? Are they interested in first-person shooters? And so we've started to create very personalized and custom-catered content that really deals with all the different personas that we're having interaction with, specifically within gaming. And obviously, that can extend to other verticals, but that's where we've started to make a significant investment based on customer insight.
Bros?